And your SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Edwin Watts Golf Shop on County Line Road. Golf clubs, golf balls, everything you need for your golf game at Edwin Watts Golf Shop on County Line Road. Stop by there before you go to Live Oaks Golf Club, Highway 49 North. Live Oaks Golf Club. Tee it up at Live Oaks. 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, WRKS. All of our guests join us on the Miller Lite guest line this morning. We welcome in Mike Detillier, WWL Radio, TV New Orleans, LSU Saints insider. He wears other hats than that. And, Mike, we'll start with what happened in Baton Rouge. How surprised were you, if you were at all, of how effective KJ Costello and Mike Leach were against LSU on Saturday?
No one expected this to happen at that level. Okay, you might have hoped that it was going to click, and that didn't surprise me. You know, I've seen Mike Leach's teams play, and the biggest surprise is, man, I had people, and even people who covered Mississippi State say, you wondered if Mike would change any, at Mississippi State. No, Mike is who he is. That's the offense he's going to run. What he ran at Texas Tech, what he ran at Washington State, he ain't changing. Now, you might think he will, but that's just the way he is. The one little wrinkle I saw he did was to get the running back more involved. And, man, listen, if I got a stud back like what he got, I want him to touch it too. But, nothing that he did offensively was a big surprise. The big surprise is LSU couldn't stop any of it. When you throw for over 600 yards, and Ed had the stat yesterday, 367 yards of yards after catch. Come on, you got to make a tackle, you got to make a play. That part was the surprise. LSU just couldn't match up against the receivers. The young defensive backs look overwhelmed. That was a lot of confusion, and it showed up big. And listen, Mississippi State was the better team that day. They deserved to win. They were a better football club that day. But anybody who thought that or says afterwards, I knew that exactly. Come on, no one would have predicted 600 yards passing.
No,
that part is extreme, but I was impressed with Costello. He threw the football well. He had a lot of pressure on him. Man, Ali Gay and B.J. Ojolari got some pressure, but he was able to withstand it. He threw the football and hit those guys. He had some really nice throws. He kind of hung it up there and let those big receivers go out and get it. And LSU defensive backs. And I think that was the biggest fear for Ed, that maybe it would be overwhelming. Now, he didn't know anything about what would happen with Stingley, but, when you're playing Elias Ricks, a true freshman, Jay Ward, who had been hurt, Darren Evans, who was a grad transfer from Nicholls State, those guys got spun around pretty good, and it was a whipping, and so you got to take your lickings. Listen, you reveled in a national championship run last year, and you knew eventually this would happen. It reminded me of something Pete Jenkins told me. This was back in February, and Pete was like, Mike, all these people cheered and hollering for Coach O, and he said, that's all great. And he said, man, listen, I'm part of it too, just like what everybody else is. But he said, eventually it's going to come to an end, and the same people who are cheering him are going to be bitching at him. He said, somebody going to beat him. He said, Mike, I guarantee you. And he said, when that happens, man, he said, all these blue bloods that, Ed was lucky last year. I told y'all he wasn't that good of a coach. You got to hear Pete say it, but, man, he was really good with it. But, listen, it was what it was. And LSU offensively, you knew there was going to be some hiccups along the way. with 4 new offensive linemen and Miles at quarterback, and they moved the football pretty well. And Miles had his moments. He held the ball a little bit too long at times, and he got sacked. But offense didn't lose that game. Come on, you got to stop somebody on defense. And Ed's taking it a little bit because he was one of them that said this defense is better than the defense they had a year ago. And listen, it's crazy because Dave Aranda, this was 2 days before the national championship game. He told me, Mike, that defense I got right now, they're really going to be something in 2020. He said, I'm not going to be here, but he said, in 2020, that defense is going to be special.
Well, and there's time. I mean, you mentioned the opt-outs and some injuries and some other things, but we all overreact in week one. I mean, LSU's got dudes, and they can. Pelini and Ed are really good defensive coaches. They can get better.
Yeah, it's good. What, can't get any worse?
No, that's true.
So,
of course, Vanderbilt will be a good remedy, Mike, this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that'll be fine with it. But overall, it was more disappointment that your defensive backs didn't play better. Come on, listen, look who they play up against in practice every day. It's not like it's you jumping from one extreme to the next. You playing against some really good wide receivers in practice. But yet goes to show you is that Allen Iverson line, man. Listen, practice is practice, game's a game. It's a great game plan by Mike Leach. It really was. He knew how to. He had a game plan to attack them. It worked to perfection, and Costello pulled it off. I mean, really did a great job. But the only wrinkle I see different from Mike and what he has done at the 2 other places, at Tech and at State, was that he got Hill much more involved than I've seen him get a running back involved. Now, again, if you're not going to run it with him, make sure he touches it head. Boy, was he effective. Man, he really looked good. If anybody ever questioned Hill's ability to catch the ball, you can scratch that off your list. Man, he knew how to get open. He caught the ball well, and he was terrific out in the open field. So that was the only new wrinkle that I saw that I had not really seen a lot from any of the and he ain't never had a running back like him, but
no.
Any running back like he's had is that he got him heavily involved in the passing attack, and LSU's linebackers and safeties looked as though, man, what was going on? It was a look of shock. I think their secondary, their back 7, it was just shock that, man, what's happening here? And then it becomes a mental thing, too. After you get beat like that, early in the game, it stays with you, because you don't want to get beat again and you become a little bit cautious and you're giving up plays. But you knew eventually it would happen with LSU. I thought it would happen early, but I didn't think it would happen against State like this. I thought the whipping would be in Gainesville, because I do know that Trask and company gave them a lot of problems in Baton Rouge last year, especially Kyle Pitts. Now, here's my thing about that. It's like Lane Kiffin in that defense. They ain't ever seen Kyle Pitts play before. Come on, somewhere along the line, you got to be able to match up against him, and he was unbelievable. I think to me those efforts, when you saw what Costello did and you saw what Kyle Pitts did, man, you talk about big time performances in week 1. You saw it. Those 2 guys tilted the field the way they played.
Mike Detillier on the Miller Lite guest line, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joins us on 105.9 The Zone. Mike, you've been involved in the NFL draft for over 30 years. What do you make of Costello if he continues to get better over the next 3 months, gets even more training in the winter months and in the spring, and by the time we get to around April 30th?
Yeah, he's got a chance to be a pretty high pick, no question about it. Because of the fact that this is a quarterback-hungry league, and you're always looking for that guy. The one thing he has gotten much better at than he was at Stanford was that he was a guy at Stanford who was a little bit hesitant to make the throw until the receiver got open. What I saw Saturday was he threw receivers open. Yeah. His anticipation skills with getting that receiver open out of the cut and the break was much better than I saw at Stanford. At Stanford sometimes when you watched him, he would wait until the wideout got open and then he would make the throw. I thought the biggest improvement with him was he threw him open. You know, that receiver wasn't out there cutting the break, and he had the ball out there for him. He really played well. His mobility is slightly above average. He's not a guy that's going to run for yardage, so to speak, but I thought his timing and his poise was certainly a notch and a half better than what I saw at Stanford. Because watching him there at times, he got a little bit kind of strong when he had a lot of pressure on him. Which, listen, that's what happens with quarterbacks. But you got to hang in there. And I thought he hung in there really good, but I was really impressed with his ability to throw the receiver open and some timing patterns that's not part of Stanford's offense.
Right.
To be honest with you. They like to pump the ball a lot to the backs coming out of the backfield and also to the tight ends. But man, he did a fantastic job of throwing that receiver open, and that was not what Stanford's offense was built around. So give Leach a lot of credit. He played to Costello's strength very well, and I think that's the mark of a really good coach. Having that ability, okay, I see what he can do, but I think maybe he can do this also. And he played to his strength. It worked perfectly. And, listen, they're going to give people a lot of trouble because if you've got the right quarterback, like we've seen with Leach in the past, the problem had been defensively you couldn't stop anybody. I mean, those defenses at Tech and State weren't really good. But, if Mississippi State's defense improves and you've got Costello rolling, and certainly you got the threat of a running game with Hill, because he's gonna ditch that out too now. He's gonna pull that wild card out in a game or two. That he's gonna run the ball a lot more than people think. That's just the way Leach is. He's gonna fool you a little bit, but I'm impressed with Costello and his poise and his presence of how well he handled. You're talking about a game on the road, even despite the fact fans. I got a few of them, but how well he handled that. Because to beat the champ, the champ, it's difficult to do.
Sure.
And he handled it like, man, that's nothing. Come on, bring him down. And again, Mike basically stuck the football middle finger to everybody out there saying, you got to change. How many people was, well, you got to adapt to the SEC. And Mike just stuck you the middle finger saying, no, I ain't changing nothing. I'm going to run my offense my way, and it's not real complicated, but, boy, when you got it rolling, it's difficult to defend. Because, we were laughing about this last night. I was like, man, that little bit of piece of paper that he's got, it's like a handkerchief. But, man, what's on that handkerchief, man, it works. Because he runs a lot of the same plays, It's a little bit out of different formations, but it's run. The plays are the same. It's not real complicated. And I think he does that to make sure that when the guys come into the system, they can pick it up pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
That it's not something that you got to overthink. And listen, he's got some tall receivers there that can get up and go get the ball. And that to me in that offense, I'm not sure he's had athletes on the edge like what he's got at State, and eventually will get, because that's going to attract a lot of wide receiver talent to State, because you can be able to touch the ball.
Sure.
Other guys can say, "Hey, come here, we'll throw you the football, 50 times a game." Leach can actually settle that. That, man, listen, 50 times, man, you catch a lot more than that. You come here. So it was a great effort on a big stage, and let's see if he can roll with that momentum with it. But again, if you thought he was going to change, you were mighty kidding yourself, because he ain't going to do it.
Out of bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Our guest, Mike Detillier, on the Miller Lite guest line, recapping Mississippi State and LSU. You were talking about Leach's offense. Was Saturday the ceiling or the beginning, Mike?
Well, man, listen, that's quite a beginning. You couldn't script anything better than what you saw Saturday. To be honest with you, had some turnovers, but listen, that in that offense, that's going to happen.
Sure,
because you're playing that sort of game. When you're going to throw the football that much, you're going to have some mishaps with the football. You're going to, get hit, and quarterback's going to fumble the ball, and you're going to throw some interceptions, whatever. But it's going to continue to roll as long as your protection stays up. And that's something, you can see their offensive line, which was a run-oriented, built offensive line, to retool that to protect your quarterback. Because that's so vital. Because I've been in two different meetings where, he's talked about offensive football and how much that is the priority, as much as the pitching catch part of the game is the protection part of the game. So the key there for State is going to be their ability to protect Costello.
right.
Because now you can say, well, we had film. Well, that film you got, basically State did again. So you got a lot of film on it. It's going to be their ability to protect Costello more than anything. That's going to be a big part of their offense if they can do it. If they can, listen, they're going to be a dangerous team. And I felt that way in doing the pregame here. That, man, listen, I thought LSU would win the game, but it's one of those type of games that, good gracious, you haven't played this type of team, and they're going to give you some problems. And then when Stingley got ruled out, then I knew they had problems. So they're going to cause some issues in the SEC, no question about it.
Mike,
all season long.
Mike Detillier on the Out of Bounds show and the Miller Lite guest line. Mike, I've got about 2 minutes here. Tom Luganbill was on earlier, and I asked him about who did Kylin Hill remind him of, and he said a little bit of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and a little bit of Ronnie Brown. What's your takeaway on that?
Well, man, listen, he's a lot bigger player than Clyde. Clyde plays like that size, but he's not that big of a football player. And Clyde was a heavy-duty back, rushing the ball. But he's impressive of what he can do. You know who he reminds me a lot of, and I wrote this in an article before the season. Before he got hurt, he reminded me so much of Devontae Freeman when he was in Atlanta. He sort of built the same way.
Yeah.
His vision, his ability to run between the tackles, and Devontae was an unbelievable player. And if you recall, Sean Payton, I think Devontae caught like 3 or 4 passes in the first half against Sean, and they threw it out to him in the third quarter, and Sean's got his hands up to his neck in that like choke position. And so when we had him on the coach's show, I was like, Coach, you can do that choke job on somebody else, but you better stop doing it against Freeman because, man, he was a Saints killer for a while. He was putting up huge numbers, and then, he had the injuries, nice with the Giants. But that's who he reminds me a lot of Devontae Freeman before he started to have the injuries. As a runner and a receiver, because people realize how good of a receiver Freeman was coming out the backfield. He was really, really good. So he reminds me much more of Freeman than Allaire, who was a tremendous receiver and all, but that their skill set's different, sort of totally different than what Hill is. But he's a stud football player. I know that. And in that offense, eventually you're going to see it. That there's going to be a couple games that Leach is going to say, okay, well, we're going to give him the football a lot more than you might have thought. And he takes off for the races. Because you got to match up. Once you spread out that way, man, that gives Hill a lot of room. And his vision and his ability to break the initial tackle is so impressive.
Whew. All right, we don't have enough time. We've only got like 30 seconds. So the Saints, we'll just have to shelve that for
no, they better snap out of it. You saw it in Moonstruck, when Cher slapped, hey, snap out of it. Well, they better snap out of it because one thing for sure, Matt Stafford can throw it.
Yes, he can.
I mean, and their secondary is really getting beat like a drum.
We'll leave it there. He's the man. Mike Detillier, at Mike Detillier on Twitter, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Does a great job on Facebook, too. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks a lot, Bo. Appreciate it, bud.
Mike Detillier on the Miller Lite guest line. Enjoy a Miller Lite tonight with maybe a cheeseburger off the grill, Blake. When are you cooking for me, speaking of? Is that happening?
What do you want to do?
I mean, you're the one that's doing all this crazy culinary stuff.
I mean, there's not much else going on. It's just watch sports and cook food and eat it.
I have to admit, you've been on a tear the last few months.
Well,
you've really dialed into your.
What else am I going to do with my money?
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, I'm going to eat it.
All right. Man, were those two great interviews or what?
Yes, sir.
Tom Luganbill and Mike Detillier. Both will be on the Out of Bounds podcast on Apple Podcast. We'd love for you to subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you want to. Hug it, love it. We love you. We're going to jump into some other things. SEC Power Rankings coming up next. This Ole Miss at Kentucky game, huge for the Lane Train and the Rebs. You do not want to start 0-2. Ole Miss at Kentucky, and it could be some fireworks too. We'll be back in a minute.